Welcome back to Describe Your World. Today I'm talking with Mark Connor. How's it going, Mark? How are you feeling?
I'm doing okay, and it's great to be here. Thank you very much, Travis.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited. I read your book, like we said in the little prep, and I read it all in one sitting, and I was like, we have so many things in common. This is going to be a fun conversation.
Well, that sounds cool. I'm really glad to know that. Yeah.
Although I will say, I wish that I could box. I cannot.
Oh, well, that's okay. Uh, yeah, you well, you're probably just not as crazy as I am, so you're not called in life to be a boxer. There's something a little off with all of us who are boxers. There's something at least a little bit off about us because you know it involves getting punched in the head. So to be enjoying an endeavor like that, which requires you to have to be able to deal with occasionally and maybe often being punched in the face and the body and stuff, uh, there's you got to be a little bit different to be attracted to that.
Well, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit. I know there's a fun poem in there that sort of compares boxing to jazz. So I'm also a musician, so that one really resonated. But
Well, that's cool.
we'll definitely talk about that. But I want to give you sort of a proper introduction. So just want to kind of mention a couple things about you, and if I get anything wrong, just yell at me and tell me the correct information.
Sounds great.
All right, so Mark Connor, boxer slash writer, which I mean, we already know it's going to be fun if you're a boxer and a writer. Author of the book It's About Time, millions of copies sold for dad. Catholic faith, Irish heritage. Also well versed in the Native American Indian Lakota tradition. Just like me, you have a bachelor's in English, which is really cool. Also, former taxi driver, and we're here to talk about you and your book.
Well, that sounds great. That's you got quite a bit of everything in there.
So why don't we kind of start? And you're from St. Paul, right?
I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. I refer to myself as a product of a mixed marriage because my dad grew up in St. Paul, my mom grew up in Minneapolis. So I'm a true Twin Cityan, born in the city of Minneapolis and raised by my parents in the city of St. Paul.
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a lot of history there, and I feel like when I'm reading your book, it's about time that you sort of touch on everything. There are a lot of themes in there. Some of the things that I jotted down include love, loss, education, guardian angels, faith, heritage, sacrifice, and obviously becoming a published writer, which I know is a really big piece of you writing the book.
Yeah, yeah, quite a bit of it. And there is a theme of guardian angels that runs through the book. I think I mentioned it in the opening scene. I talk about my father having a. I'm supposed to pick up my father on 30th of my father and mother at the airport on the 30th of September 2019. I'm walking into a Jimmy John's sandwich joint on Grand Avenue in St. Paul. Just at the door outside it, and it's 3 o'clock or so in the afternoon, and my phone goes off, and I answer. It's my mom, and she's in the hospital with my dad, saying he's had a heart attack. They were just about to come back home from a 4-day vacation in San Francisco, and they'd been. I mean, I could. It actually probably better to be reading it, but I'll just say it real quickly. They're talking about how much they loved each other and how for over 50 years they had this great marriage, and they loved their my older brother and me and my brother's wife and kids, and how happy they were with their life, and they couldn't wait to get back home to their life. And as he started the car, he had a heart attack and slumped over. And I say the mom put the car in park and jumped out and yelled for help. And there was a health fair going on at that Costco, and two EMTs kept him alive, and he was on life support for the next 10 days. But I say, there, they kept him alive. I said the guardian angels were watching over, and throughout the the book I talk about that I have a couple of poems at the end of the first chapter, and they're written to a really beautiful woman who I just uh, 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 she just kind of at that time of her life had to kind of move away from town, and I just hadn't communicated to her exactly what I really would have liked to have communicated to her to keep her in my life. But the end of that second of those two poems, I actually say, you know, your guardian angels already talked to mine. Together they've watched us share laughter and argue to the point of crying. You know they're sent from God, who really does exist, is not a tyrant or a terrorist. Rather, he is love, family, and life, and held to common in the core. Um, and I go on with it at the end of that, leading up to the end of that poem. Later on, a couple of other times, as I go on in different chapters, I mentioned guardian angels watching over me, watching over my parents, and I kind of come to the conclusion at the end, and this kind of gives away something about it. But anyone who does read the book, you're going to find out in the first page that my father did die. And so, you know, you can ask the question, why is it that I say the guardian angels were watching over us all along when he died anyway? Well, I mean, the point is that if we believe in angels and we believe we have guardian angels, um, a lot of times we can look back in life and say, well, gee, you know, your guardian angel sure was watching out for you at that time. You know, another saying would say, well, you sure dodged a bullet with that one. But uh, you know, I can remember there's a one friend I mentioned in there named David Reese who died in a motorcycle crash, and I have a poem that's dedicated to him called "My Now Departed Brother," and um, I was going to pick him up our senior year of high school at his house to drive to our high school's football game on a Friday night, and there was a guy parked in front of train tracks, and there was no arm at that crossing, and I was wondering why he was just parked there. And so I drove around him, and as I drove around him and I went across the tracks, there was a train coming. And you know, and again, the guy blew the horn, and I went right by, and he just missed me. I remember telling my parents that had happened, and my dad just says, "Yeah, your guardian angel is watching out for you," because if I'd have done it, if I'd have done that a moment later, I probably would have been dead. And so there are a lot of times in life when I see these things happening. Well, if we really believe in guardian angels, the guardian angel is trying to get us to the point that we're supposed to be in life, where we're supposed to be in life, doing what we're supposed to be doing in life, the right thing at the right time, and hopefully doing the right thing at the right time when the moment comes that we die. And you know, uh, and my father, when he did die, and he was there on life support. My brother got down there for 5 days before I did, and his grandchildren weren't down there, but my brother played from a cell phone. He played recordings of them giving him a message into his ear, and my mom and I were there praying over him when he died. And I do read there is a passage towards the end when I talk about Saint Joseph, and Saint Joseph is considered to be the patron saint of a happy death, because it doesn't say this in the Bible, but it's just kind of presumed traditionally that when he died, he had Jesus and Mary right there with him when he died, you know, and that was parallel to what happened with my father. Is, well, when he did die, he was a Catholic, he had priests there to give him his last rites, and he had his wife and his family there. I mean, we weren't all there at the moment that he died. My mom and I were, but my brother had got to be there and say goodbye before he died. And so, on that happy note, I guess we can have a joyful conversation about that and the other themes that you mentioned.
Well, I obviously I haven't shared any of my writing back to you, but I could send you a couple things. But I do write about death a lot, so that's obviously a fun light topic for us to have on the podcast.
It
And
sounds
I guess in
great.
a lot of ways, like in a lot of ways, you celebrate death because like you said with the guardian angels point, if we do presume that Joseph and Mary, or Jesus and Mary, were with Joseph at his death, death doesn't have to be this scary exit from life.
It doesn't. And the thing is, the title of the book, it's about time. There I am watching my dad. So, you know, I try to look like I try to look good. I try to keep myself healthy. You wouldn't know it by looking at me, or maybe you would. I don't know. Maybe I'm fooling myself, but I'm over 50 years old, and and I had just turned 50 when he died, and it was just a couple of months after. And there are a lot of things in my life I've been planning to do and plotting to do, and I talk about that in the book, different endeavors involving boxing, involving writing, um, professional endeavors, and big plans that didn't work out many times. And there I am looking at my dad, saying, thinking about the things I wanted him to see me do in my life, that I want him to be a part of. I really always wanted to marry and have children, and I don't. I mean, I still, I'm a hopeful person, and I still look at it as, I'm a man, and if there's a woman that I could find who tolerates me and is still young enough to bear a child, I'm going for it. Um, but he didn't see that. He didn't see that happen, and he didn't. Obviously he's never going to see me be champion of the world, but he's not going to see me train a champion, and he's not going to see me. He's not going to be alive on Earth to see me publish a book. And I said to myself, looking at him, I said, with the amount of writing projects I've had in the works and that I've kept uh, for so long, and always saying I'm putting it off because I'm going to eventually revise it so that it's perfect and so forth. I said, no, I have no excuse for this. I've got the skill to write a book and have it published, and I should be doing that. And he had argued with me. In fact, I think I should read that passage. The that poem with the where I mentioned your guardian angel already talked to mine, um, which is called "Life So Simple." And then right after that is the closing of chapter one. Um, and that kind of talks about this argument my dad and I had, probably as I think it was as far back as 2012, and he was telling me, well, why don't you? How come you haven't published a book yet? The thing is, I said to myself as I looked at him, I said, "That's it. I'm going to publish a book as soon. I'm going to write and publish a book as soon as I can." I knew exactly what I was going to write, and it took me a little bit of time. I went through the year of mourning before I wrote it, but I wrote it very fast, and it's published. And here it is out here, and it's basically what he was telling me to do is quit holding on to stuff and expecting it's going to be the million copy seller. It's going to be the perfect thing. Just get the first one done, then move on to the next one. So anyway, so the poem to the young lady is "Life So Simple," written on Sunday, March 31st of 2019. So that was just a few months before he died. As if to pray, you start the day in meditation on your bicycle wheel, the separate spokes united in the center. You want me to be blunt, you say. I want to be direct, but fear I'll frighten you away. The final action is the original intention. This statement is authentically true, not just my invention. My responsibility is to you, a comfort for my rest, a respect in my behavior, helping you to be your best. You can push me away, invite me to stay, or walk with me today, but we met for a reason, to teach each other and learn. Such a fact comes not from acts, but is a grace we did not earn. Demons distract, demons lie, and demons discourage us from our destiny till we die. Friends encourage, friends assist, and friends persist with love on which we rely. Your guardian angel already talked to mine. Together they have watched us share laughter and argue to the point of crying. You know they're sent by God who really does exist and is not a tyrant or a terrorist. Rather, he is love, family, life, held in common at the core. You and I, specific spokes, united in the center, spinning round from place to place, and nothing more. There were some other poems I put together qualifying for appropriate inclusion in this book. I've always held myself, of course, to the highest of standards, never believing any of these poems ready for an attempt at publication, so I never tried, which is why I so embarrassingly titled the story, It's About Time. Dad challenged me once, as far back, I believe, as 2012, asking me why by the age of 40 I hadn't published at least one book. If I really was a writer, as I asserted myself to be, I should have been able to publish at least 5 novels or other books by then. I told him to lay off, that there were legitimate reasons for current incompletion, and that literary success was on its way, but that was all an excuse. The real reason was a lie in my heart that my work was going to be great. I just needed time to concentrate, which is always delayed right now for the job or the friend in trouble or another excuse, which justified not trying. The truth is, I was scared, so I never dared. If this book, which can fall flat in its face, is never presented to the public, I'll never know if you, the reader, recognize my talent. If it does, in fact, fall flat in its face, at least metaphorically, I fall flat on mine. However, so what? It's about time. So, yeah, that's the end of chapter 1.
So it's really nice to sort of connect, not necessarily an expectation, but just sort of that sort of reality that your dad presents to you and saying, you know, there's never, it's always time to start. It's
Yeah.
something that you were ready for and sort of compiling your work, even though, as you mentioned later in the book, you lost a lot of your work when it was stolen from your car.
Yep, yep, yep. 170 pages of manuscript and notebook of my first novel, and a whole bunch of short stories and poems and stuff. When I had taken a trip after my last fight, 102 amateur fights, and Achilles tendons problems, and not quite back at that national level that I wanted to be, and thinking, I'm not going to have the momentum to make a lot of money and have the build up if I'm fighting professionally. And, when am I going to be a writer then? So I'm going to be a writer now. So I took off to Seattle, drove out to Seattle and stayed with a friend of a friend, and went uh, into uh, I was a couple of suburbs out, went into town every day for 3.5 weeks, walking boat to boat, looking for a fishing boat job. And finally, about 3.5 weeks into it, when I thought I'm going to have to go home with nothing, and I got a job on a salmon fishing boat and went up to Alaska, for Southeast Alaska, for the summer, and made some decent money and everything. But I'd written a whole bunch of stuff. When I came back, when I'd gone down the coast through uh, through Oregon into California, Mount Shasta. It stopped at a bunch of places to visit different people. Mount Shasta, L.A. and San Francisco. Came back up through, stopped in Las Vegas. Went up through Arizona. New Mexico, Arizona, Nebraska, Iowa, back to Minnesota, and went right back in the boxing gym. And it was outside of Glancy's gym on February, I think, 27th or 28th of 1995. I was in the gym sparring with Will Grigsby, my teammate, who ended up becoming IBF junior flyweight champion of the world. And I walked out. I was the last one that in the gym that night, and I had left my backpack on the uh, passenger seat of my car. And as I walked up to the car, and I noticed something it's kind of shiny up there. And I realized what was shiny is the glass is broken and was on the passenger seat, and there was a brick in place of my my backpack, which had all that writing in it. And I still have that brick to this day.
Oh, that's cool. That's something that I would have kept for sure because you don't have your work, but you get to keep the brick.
I see. I wrote all this stuff. I could, I can brag to the ladies. Yeah, I wrote these. I had this novel. I was writing. I had these really beautiful poems. I had these great stories. See this brick. This is proof I did it.
No, that's a sad story, and it's impressive that you followed through with your vocation to write despite the huge loss because 170 pages is not a small loss. That's a very large loss.
Yeah, it's pretty big. I look back on it and I can remember stuff portions of what I had written. Because I rewrote the whole thing. It's been a it was the first novel and kind of a little bit autobiographical in nature. I've been having this. It's just been sitting for all these years because I've had ideas of um how to alter the presentation of it so that it's a little more that's more fictional, and I've figured out how to do that. But then I've done stuff like written this book and some other things, and so I haven't been able to sit down and make that a daily endeavor again. But I actually have an idea for a trilogy related to it, so that's uh, that's something um, that's something to look forward to. In the next, hopefully the next. I would say most 5 years, but I'd like in the next 3 years to have that one completed and presented to the public and be moved on to the next thing. And a couple of other books I'd like to write. In particular, I want to go into writing fiction because this is you could call this creative nonfiction. I think I'm not that really well versed in all these genres, but um, or you could also call it a memoir, or it's an autobiography, and it does read like a novel, and then it has 20 poems running through it. Um, 19 that are uh, actually obviously designated as poems, but the 20th one is the last passage that I read you. After I read that poem, Life's So Simple, I started a paragraph and I broke that paragraph at the point where I'm answering my dad back about why haven't I written, published 5 books by now. That's all broken into. You can remember from reading. I'm sure you can't see it when I'm reading it when you're just listening to it, but that's broken into a poem. The way I wrote the closing of that chapter. So that's what
Right.
it's described in the back as a saga wrapped around a package of poems guarded by angels.
Well, I have a couple passages here that I really want to see try to connect with you, and I think they're sort of it's interesting because they're both sort of related to these interactions you had with women. So I know there's a connection, and I'm excited to hear how you sort of pull them together. But the first one, there's a book you mentioned, "Women Who Run with the Wolves," and it was being read by someone you knew, a young woman. So you wrote the poem called "Halfway Around." And there's a quick passage in there that I really, really liked. And it says, I'm halfway around to your way of thinking. All you have to do is come halfway around to mine, and we'll meet right here in the middle. And then soon after, you sort of talk about another poem called 10 Years Ago by Buddy Guy. The backstory being that the musician who read it, didn't understand the value of the poem. And so you were troubled by that because you thought the poem, was deeper and more important. So this sort of just relationships with people and how you interact with them. I'm curious if you have thoughts on that.
Well, the interesting thing about this, so that that woman is a really beautiful and troubled woman. And so, like, and I say later, so the halfway around girl, the first one you referred to in chapter 6 is the only chapter without any poems. I do say at a point that I do not say how I met her or her name or um where she worked or anything like that because um people who know her and would read this would recognize who she is, but I don't want to publicly name her because I believe that we live in a time when people use information for their own perverse perceptions of power, and they just try um, to use it one way or another to kind of shame or humiliate people or to so I'm trying to respect her privacy. I would respect them both the privacies, but the second woman that you just referred to in the discussion about the poem 10 years ago by Buddy Guy, which is a poem about the blues song 10 years ago, which was written and sung by Buddy Guy. And our discussion was she had read the first poem that I presented in the book called uh, The Perfect Metaphor, which is talking about the perfect metaphor to describe boxing is jazz. Um, and then she read the second poem, or the poem I'm referring to, um, 10 years ago by Buddy Guy, and she liked the first one much better than she didn't even like. She didn't. She just didn't resonate with 10 years ago by Buddy Guy. When I wrote that, I was down in rural Nevada, helping this old man who was a guy that he's a personal training client of mine who was a eccentric old millionaire and uh, had uh, uh, was into he loved alcohol and the women and ladies in the night, basically what he loved. And he was a bachelor and he was kind of sad and alone. And um I was kind of thinking at the time about just the way life was, and I it was it was something where I was making money doing what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was doing using uh my skills both as a boxing trainer and writer, and both those skills to the degree that I should be. And I was thinking about how when I was 26 years old, I was with an older man uh, listening uh, to that the album I had that on, and I was uh, blues. It was Chess Records blues. I don't think it's called Blues Volume One or something. It was just a blues uh, collection compilation of different great blues artists. That song being on there, and how I was 26 and thinking how now I've been just a year, almost 2 years since I'd stopped boxing competitively, and thinking how 10 years earlier I was 16 years old, and I got to the finals of Midwest Golden Gloves, and I lost to a guy named Jason Tintes, who was ranked eighth in the United States, and um, how I'd been to a National Junior Olympics tournament. It was when I was younger and made to the quarterfinals, and how I so wanted to be on that level and everything. And if I would have made a couple of different decisions in my life at that time, if I would have won that one fight, I mean, um, there were the way the pairings were lined up. I would have one guy that I would have fought the first or second fight in the National Golden Gloves that year was a guy who ended up becoming a world champion. And just the opportunities missed and everything. I was just thinking, in 10 years, it just hit me really hard, and it was kind of a real stark feeling. And when I was talking to her about this, and she was just saying, yeah, I don't, that doesn't. And this girl's she plays the blues. She's a guitarist, a singer, songwriter, well known locally and everything. And at the time was starting to really kind of get known. And I was thinking, you're only 26 years old. That's why you don't get it, you know. But
Right.
then, wait a minute. I was getting it. Was seemed so profound to me when I was her age, which is 26. And actually, both of the women in question, they're the same age, so they both would be 33 years old right now. Both those two women, give the timeline of because they were both of them were 26 that year because it was the same year that I had had those two different interactions. So it's a funny thing, you know. And yeah, what were you asking? So what was your question about the whole halfway around? You got yeah. Was there a specific question pertinent to that? To
Well, I
that?
think what I kind of noticed as I'm kind of working through the book was one of the major themes that I caught in a lot of your poems was like relationships. So not just maybe somebody you had a direct relationship with, but even the little Belfast sister who was dancing. Like there's a lot of stuff with just interconnection with people and real meaningful things that touch you and move you. So I just kind of picked up that both of those poems were sort of related to interactions you have with those people.
Yeah, yeah. Little Belfast Sister, and that was 1996, and I'd gone to visit my friend in Belfast. He'd been he'd been a chaperone of uh, the Irish political prisoners children's holiday program. Now, a lot of people when they hear, okay, wow, you were involved with some pretty heavy stuff, man. And yeah, this was pretty heavy. There was a program in the 80s that tried to deal with the troubles in Ireland, um, which is to say, deal with the war in Ireland between uh, those who were one those of the IRA, which is known as it's known as a terrorist organization. Um, and uh, there was those who were the loyalists would had their own paramilitaries. From they would take people from that's primarily Catholic, the first one, and then the latter primarily Protestant. There was a Northern Ireland children's program that would take host families in the United States that would host kids to come over for a trip. A Protestant and a Catholic living together. It's supposed to be a cross community thing. This wasn't a program where you had to be Catholic. Most of them were Catholic. Um, there was a program though specifically for families open up their houses to children uh, of families who had a parent or a family member imprisoned or killed because they were fighting the British, and so they had been imprisoned by the British, right? And they would come over during the summertime because there's this the Loyal Orange Order is a Protestant uh, organization that's it was originally founded only for Anglicans, and after the 1798 United Irishman Rebellion, which was uh, Protestants, Catholics, and dissenters. Dissenters are non-Anglican Protestants. Um, they united together and they failed, but they had a rebellion against England to end British rule and lost. And after that unified Protestant Catholic rebellion, the Orange Order opened up its membership to non Anglican Protestants, and that drove kind of a further wedge between Protestants and Catholics um, in Ireland, and then eventually, after Northern Ireland was formed in the treaty in 1921, that's concentration where most Protestants were in, and most Unionists or Loyalists were in Ireland. It drove a further wedge, and so it became more of a sectarian battle. Anyway, the Loyal Orange Order has these marches that start the day after Easter and they go into September, and they commemorate King William of Orange, who won the Battle of the Boyne in 1690, which sealed British rule to this day in Ireland. And he led the Loyalist and Protestant troops against King James, who had rallied Catholic troops. And it's not all of their. I mean, it's not all of their parades are necessarily a bad thing, but there are certain ones that are specifically routed through Catholic nationalist neighborhoods, and these are neighborhoods where they're people are in public housing, and it's really disruptive and very violent. So during the high point of that marching season, they'd come over to different uh, sponsor families in Minnesota, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, California, Illinois, all these different states, and there were a bunch that came to Minnesota, and I knew this guy who was a chaperone in 1994 and 1995. I visited him in Belfast, and after I'd gone in, uh, you know, I was walking down the Falls Road, which is the Catholic nationalist area, looking at the murals and everything, and I saw, kids are coming home from school, and I saw this girl that looked like she was 7 years old. That was my guess, so probably a first grader, second grader, in her little Catholic Girls School uniform, and she walked by uh, uh, mural of the 10 men who died on the 1981 hunger strike, and she just pumped out a bunch of step dance moves, and then just kept walking on, and was just such a beautiful thing, and so I ended up writing that poem. Anyway, I'm talking about the poem. I'm not actually reading the poem. That particular poem, it's one that I was actually it's one of the ones I was probably most, um, not, I don't know if the word is, I was most nervous about putting it in here, because I'm a little worried about losing people if I sound like I'm really militant about that issue or anything. Um, because I don't want, I want to be, uh, I want to, I want to have as many people like and enjoy this book as possible. But it was just the feeling that I had at the time, and uh, it was it was a really good memory. When I had seen that girl, and I saw a lot of these, a lot of people, like, someone's at so many years ago. I mean, if I were to see that person now, if I met her now, um, she'd be in her late 30s now. So like it should be a much different person to talk to. The same person, but I would be sitting there having an adult conversation with her. And then so you asked me about the halfway around that thing. Um, you mentioned, so it was a young woman who was reading the book, this book called Women Who Run with the Wolves, which I had heard of before, and she offered it to me to read it, and I had I was thinking about that novel that never was completed and everything, and just stuff in my life I had to get done. And it was so thick, I didn't want to read it. I just did. No, but I was she was so beautiful the way she held it out to me. And it's almost like she had this attitude in her face. She's like, you know what you're thinking about. You know that you want to get close to me. Go ahead, read it. I dare you to read it. That's what I felt like, subconsciously she was saying to me. And I turned it down at the time. And then uh, my friend's girlfriend, I was talking to her about it, and she looked it up on her phone and said, "Boy, that sounds so interesting. I'm going to buy it for both of us." And she gave me a copy of it, so I read it. And then when I was reading it, I was imagining having conversations with this girl about this book. And so then that's how I ended up. As I was falling asleep that night, I fell asleep and I woke up, and I was thinking about her, and I decided the poem just came to me, and I wrote it just like that. And the thing was, it was one of those things where, you know, I I I, I, I say I have kind of a natural aversion to what we in contemporary times traditionally think of as, radical feminism, and so in the aversion I have is anything that diminishes the value of woman and man coming together as one in marriage, and that diminishes the value of the institution of marriage, because I believe that the strongest generation of family comes from that sacred union. And I think that the poems that I wrote even earlier in that, like Two Pilgrim Souls on Ankara, where I'm uh, where I'm comparing marriage to of two people as two people becoming a monstrance. And a monstrance is the um, it's the device that's used to display the Blessed Sacrament, which is a consecrated host, the body of Christ in the Catholic Church. Um, so so that's what that's the aversion is I have to feminism. But then I was reading that book and there was all these, it's all these old fairy tales and stuff like that, and talking about the myths of and uh, different beliefs about women and the value of women in different cultures. And as I read the book and I was hoping to connect up with her and talk to her about it, I was thinking about how, yeah, I know you've read this book and you've read it a few times and you think of this as something that's really motivational to you as a young woman, and your experience with men has been something that has been negative in your life. Um, but I uh, I have this perception of women, and it's informed by the Catholic faith, and it's also informed by the time I spent in the um, that I spent kind of bonding with my friends from the Lakota tradition, and and there is you have these different traditions from different cultures that are uh, definitely their own and definitely have contradictions, but there's a certain kind of value that is universal among people in what the dignity of a human being is.
All right. So I have a quote here from one of my favorite poems from your book that I was going to read, and then I'll let you kind of fill in the backstory here on this one. This one's called "They Call Me a Doorman." I guess I didn't really have a choice unless I wanted to spend my days in hell, because that's the price you pay when you refuse your destiny, or so I have learned. But that is my personal understanding of the human journey through life, and it is better explained at a later time.
Then I close with suffice it for now to say I am a doorman. Stay with me through my story, and if you hear with your heart as well as you can listen with your ears, when you are ready, you will understand. Um, that was from a conversation with Lynn. Her full name is Lynn Feniger. She was the manager of Anda Young at the time. Anda Young is AINDAHYUNG, 3 words, and it means our home in the Ojibwe language. Our home center. It's a Native American, uh, Native American Indian homeless, temporary emergency homeless shelter for kids aged 5 to 17. 5 boys and 5 girls, their capacity, and temporary emergency. So when a child is needs out of home placement, the child is there until sent back to parents or to other family members or to other tribal members. If they can't find a tribal member, another American Indian, or then they would go outside the Native community, and they would also accept people who were not Native American Indians, but it was a culturally specific is a culturally specific program and run under their principles. Um, so it was I had worked there first as I had done direct care there for a short time. I was education specialist, which is a liaison between the shelter and schools and getting the kids placed in schools and everything. But mostly it was direct care work that I did, which was uh, like uh, day staff, like weekend uh, weekend lead day staff or um, evenings during the week or stuff like that. And at the time, uh, I was helping train a professional fighter. I was secretly training my own to have on my own to have a professional fight. I was seeking freelance writer work. I was trying to build my personal training business as a boxing trainer, and I was trying to write fiction. So I was doing a lot of stuff, and I was actually driving taxi cab part time, and the the cab driving was getting to be too much for me. So I had was on call at the time, so I was very rarely working there. And then I called up Lynn one day or I called up one day and she answered. She was managing, asking if they needed any extra help, and they needed someone to do weekend overnights, which was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11 p.m. till 8 a.m. Awake, and it was steady. It wasn't a job with benefits or anything, but it was steady, and it was something that was going to actually put a little bit of money in my pocket that I was living cheaply that would just pay the rent and everything. And so I started doing that around February of 2003, and it became regular, and I became their permanent part-time uh, overnight guy. And I had just had this interaction with a young boy that was 5 years old, and then later um, she was giving me my evaluation, and she was telling me, I see your role here is just keeping the kids safe. That you're a protector. You're kind of like the doorman. And I, I mean, should I guess it's just very short. I'll just read that real quickly. Um, she says, the way I see you, she said, is you're like the doorman. Really? I said. Yeah, like the doorman in the sweat? Yeah, I said. I know exactly what you mean. The doorman is positioned by the door in the sweat lodge, ready to yell out, Aho, Mitakuyasin, which means all my relations in Dakota, signaling the fireman standing outside to pull open the cloth door to let air in and cool it down. The doorman makes sure everyone in the sweat lodge is physically all right, that no one gets hurt from the intense heat. Yeah, she said, especially for the younger kids. Your role here is to make them safe. Sometime in the next year or two, being both lonely and alone, realizing I was in the latter portion of my middle 30s, still hadn't found a wife, and still spent all my weekends, the time I believed people were out meeting the ones they'd be with, working awake overnight in that shelter. I wrote the following poem. They call me a doorman. It's actually a false start, the opening to a much longer story I never got back to, but it came from that conversation with Lynn. So I included here as a short standalone poem. And, you know, I felt really, really isolated at that time. And that's also just after the portion of the book. I don't know if you want me to read that, I will, where I had the interaction with this 5-year-old little boy, that was there. Didn't know where his parents were and was just having a breakdown. And, then was met my dad. He picked me up to take me to breakfast that Monday morning afterwards, and I was just sharing with him the experience and the just the sadness I felt about having to accompany a kid that was in that position, which was so much different from mine. I mean, when I was 5 years old, I mean, here I was at that time, I might have been 35, 36. And, I was telling my dad about this situation, and it hurt so much. I mean, I almost feel like crying right now. I actually started to cry a little bit. And I'm thinking, in my mid 30s, my dad wanted to be, who I wrote this book to honor and to remember, because I feel so bad having lost him um, after 50 years. Um, how lucky I am that both my parents were always there. And so, I write this book with the intention of uh, of perpetuating in the public mind, in the public heart, uh, the value of man and woman coming together in actual marriage and loving each other and and being with their children, because that's the best way that children are going to feel loved and then going to feel part of a family. And while I'm expressing that, and this is my value and this is my observation of what I believe is an absolute truth, I also hope, and I believe I do accomplish this with this book, and I really hope that people who read it feel this, that if that's not your experience, if you didn't have that luck uh, in your life, um, or if you don't really believe as strongly as I do in that sanctity, that after reading this book, you still feel from the narration and the presentation of it respected, and also walk away with it from it with a sense of hope. That's what my real intention with this book is.
So before we kind of wrap up here, I just want to make sure that you have a chance to kind of say a closing statement, whatever you're feeling. If there's a message you want to get out there for people who are watching and listening, and I also want to make sure you also get a chance to promote your book and any links that you might have where people can find you on social media.
Sure. Well, yeah, I just wish everyone the best, and I just uh, I hope that people have enjoyed the conversation and that they uh, can see, the intention I have to connect with people and uh, give people a sense of encouragement and hope, and that ultimately this book is written for the purpose of showing and expressing to the world what my view is of the world, and how to kind of keep ourselves together as human beings, and particularly as a country in the U.S. Uh, and if you don't exactly, if you don't exactly find my view and my expression of of my observation of things to be exactly something you agree with, what I really hope, and I believe that I've come close to accomplishing this with this book. Um, what I hope happens is that upon reading it, you are one, entertained, that you two, um, that you have felt respected in the reading of the book, and that walking away from reading the book, that you also feel encouraged and you walk away with a sense of hope. Because that's ultimately what I'm trying to do, is express the values of love, family, and life, and give hope to the reader. And the book is called "It's About Time." Millions of copies sold for Dad. Uh, Connemara Patch Press. Get it on Amazon or on Lulu. If you don't want to give the all bunch of money to Jeff Bezos, give it to Lulu. Those are the two. Those are the two platforms. And Amazon, you can also get it on Kindle, but Amazon or Lulu. You can also go to my website, boxersandwritersmagazine.com, and on the books page there, you can click on the Amazon or Lulu and purchase it. Uh, I do have a Substack. Um, it's Mark Connor, IC punchdrunk.substack.com. The official title is uh, Irish Catholic Drunk in St. Paul, the name of my Substack. And I'm just in the next week going to start publishing more on that. I haven't published the last 2 months, but that and boxersandwritersmagazine.com are the ways to really find me. And then also go to Amazon or Lulu and get it. Millions of It's About Time. Millions of copies sold for Dad. I really hope you like it. I think if nothing else, read it while when you're going to bed at night, and it'll put you to sleep. Um, or judge the book by its cover, because Eric Keast, he's the guy who got me the job at the shelter on Young. He's a great artist, and he did the cover work. And you could spend, if you have this on your coffee table, it's a great conversation piece, and also you could just spend hours just looking at it and seeing all the imagery in it. It's very entertaining. So I hope that you read it and you like it. I appreciate the fact that you read it, and if your listeners follow your advice, read it like Travis. If Travis read it, it's got to be good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I told Mark before our conversation that I read his book in one sitting. It's a page turner. It's really good. I really loved a lot of the poems that were in there, and I will definitely go back and revisit those. And I hope everybody enjoys the episode, and we'll definitely be back for another conversation at some point in the future. But of course, it was a pleasure.